Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to session number 3 on day 1 of hearing stream 5, dealing with part 1 of the overlays. And part 1 covers sites of significance, Maori, notable tree and heritage areas. Welcome to the TELPUP team, Mr. Anderson, Mr. McCarrison, and Mr. Cantor. Are you part of that team? Good.
Yes.
He is, yep.
I'll just let you, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to come online this morning at all.
No, we haven't.
Okay, so we had a full morning and we've got through the 42A report and the summary statements from all 3 subtopics this morning. So finished at 12:15 and just reconvening now. So you're the first submitter off the block. We had quite a robust discussion about the terms trimming and pruning prior to the lunch adjournment. So I feel like we might have some questions for you, but we're in your hands, Mr. McCarrison and Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Yeah, just a quick introduction. I'm Tom Anderson. I'm a planner at Insight and have been appointed by the telecommunication companies for the Wairarapa proposed district plan. With me is Graham McCarrison, who's the Planning and Engagement Manager at Spark, and Andrew Cantor, who's the Planning and Engagement Manager at Chorus. You've mentioned notable trees and the issues raised with trimming and pruning there. I might touch on that first, so because there's only 2 matters that were in contention through my evidence. I generally agree with the approach of Mr. Gorman that providing for trimming and pruning in the framework is appropriate. However, in my view, I think it should be consistently applied wherever the word pruning is used, that it should be trimming and pruning. And I note that that's consistent with where the Wellington proposed district plan is as well.
Mr. Anderson, just on that first one, I can tell you that the Deputy Chair has put that very question. That and come back.
Sorry, so we just lost a bit of audio there. So yeah. I heard the Deputy Chair has raised that as a question and then the audio dropped out.
Mr. Gorman has given an undertaking. Can you hear me?
Yep.
That must be from your end.
Okay. I'll see what I can do.
Okay, well, Mr. McCarrison, can you hear me all right?
Generally, yes. It does break up a little bit, but it's okay at the moment.
We might just bring the microphone a little bit closer because for some reason I seem to be doing all the talking.
You can change that.
Quite unusual. How's that sounding? Is that any better?
Yes,
loud and clear.
you.
Okay. So just question was put by the Deputy Chair, Mr. Gorman. Mr. Gorman understood the issue about the inconsistent use of the term trimming and pruning at both the policy and the rule level, and he's going to give some consideration to it. We also heard from the Council's arborist advisor too, who said he wasn't too perturbed either way, but recognised the need for consistency. So that will be addressed in the right of reply, and it's a standing. Mr. Gorman's not here. Oh yes, sorry. It's a standing arrangement, if you like, without the need for direction, that if you and Mr. Gorman believe that some further dialogue on this would be useful, don't wait for a direction from us. Please take the initiative in that sense. So we do try and give directions on matters that are a little bit more sort of nuanced. So, but this is one where if you want to get on the phone and have a chat, by all means do so.
Noted. Yes, I think that'd be worthwhile. So take the direction there, and I won't dwell on that point. I think we can move on to site of significance to Māori Rule 7 and the clarity that was sought through the evidence there. I think in Mr. Wisney's summary statement, he provides the intent of the rule really clearly around what the term RMA legal instrument means or is intended to mean. I think it could be clearer in the rule itself. I've noted in the rule it's got terms brackets such as consent notice and encumbrance or something along those lines. And in my view, for it to be a permitted activity rule, that provision needs to be binary. It needs to be abundantly clear what it means, and the words such as, I think, are examples as opposed to a definitive list. So if the word such as could be replaced by something like limited to, and perhaps if there's other instruments that that Mr. Wesney is considering, that they could be added into the brackets, then that would just provide that clarity rather than the ambiguity that I think currently exists in that rule.
Yes, just be aware that Mr. Wesney's colleague, Morgan Fallowfield, is the primary author on that.
Thank you.
Also, we had a number of questions to both Morgan Fallowfield and Mr. Wesney on this matter, because I wasn't satisfied that I understood the issue. I put it to the 42A officers that an RMA, what's the term? An RMA instrument may include an NES or a permitted activity rule, and she agreed, but she said the full answer relies on a full reading of the rule, which refers to as shown on an area.
Yes, yeah. I think that it does provide some clarity. I'm just turning to it my evidence.
But that would preclude, in her view, and in Mr. Wesney's view also, the NES or a permitted activity rule, because in a SASM there was a site that's subject to a SASM, particularly a site that has a polygon characteristic or a spatial depiction, wouldn't have an area that authorises an activity in the same way that, say, a consent order or a consent notice might.
I think that doesn't definitively have it either.
No.
I think from reading the summary statement, I understand that it is trying to limit it to those instruments that give you a right. I think the rule's not 100% clear.
As Mr. Anderson, is your concern with the intent?
Not with the intent. No, not at all.
Or the delivery.
The delivery, the intent, the intent, and that was clearly put through in the summary statement. So there was a bit of a test put in with the wording that was, or trying to clarify it, I guess, through the wording of my evidence, and then that clarification was provided in the wording of the summary statement. I don't think it's provided in the wording of the rule. And as per your comment earlier, Mr. McMahon, I'm happy to work in with the 42A officers if that is of assistance to them.
Yes, I'm just looking at Mr. Wesney. Morgan Fairfellow's online. You'll see
that.
Yes. Yeah, I'm getting nods all around. Yes. So
happy to do that, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah. Again, I won't be issuing a direction on that. And you'll be subject to the undertaking that discussion with sufficient time for Morgan and Hamish to file their right of reply in 15 working days' time.
No problem.
Okay. Was there anything else?
No, it was a very brief piece of evidence and mainly answered through the summary statement. So
yes, the summary statements are very useful, and they're coming out a little bit earlier now, as early as they can anyway.
So, I appreciate it. I've been in that 42A role before and know there's a lot of time pressures on before a hearing. So appreciate that they don't always come out as early as you'd like when you're in the submitter role, but they certainly make a difference and help frame how we present at the hearing.
Mr. McCarrison and Mr. Cantor, was there anything either of you wanted to add from Boris and Spark's perspective?
No. Tom and me had a debate this morning around different matters, so well and truly sorted out. So I appreciate the way the panel's handling this and encouragement of the conversation between the experts to sort it
Yes.
out.
Yeah, I see the, Mr. Cantor, you're on the same view?
Yes, correct. Nothing further from me.
Yes, good. I see the list of telcos has grown significantly since the early days, so that's good. And without being facetious, we certainly support that industry approach. It makes a lot of sense to us, hearing from a combined industry who are dealing with similar facilities and activities rather than having them dispersed and through separate presentations. So thank you for that. And I guess we'll hear from you in terms of the hearing stream on network utilities.
And possibly next Tuesday.
Yes.
Of
Hearing
course.
stream 6.
Overlay.
Yeah.
Part 2 of the overlays.
Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry, I meant to ask was assumed there was no questions. Okay. We're a little bit ahead of time. Is Mr. and Mrs. Smock and Mrs. Smock, like to come up to the front table and just make yourself comfortable. Thank you. You weren't here this morning, Mr. Smock, were you? No. Oh, okay. So I'm David McMahon. I'm the chair, independent chair of the panel, and these are my colleagues, mixture of councillors from the 3 district councils and we representatives from Rangatani and Kahununu. So full panel. I hope it doesn't appear too intimidating, but on these important matters, we wanted the full panel to hear the submissions. On some of the more discrete topics, we've split into smaller panels, 4 or 5. So don't feel like you're facing a wall of interrogation. That's not the intention at all. We're here to hear your submission. We've already heard the submission from the council officers, Mr. Kernan and Ms. Adams, and so your opportunity to speak. And we've got Mr. Hooper also. Welcome, Mr. Hooper.
Thank you. I was here this morning, so.
Yes, I did see you in the background. So we're in your hands.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the full introduction. My name is Ryan Smock. My wife cannot be with us today. She's undergoing thyroid cancer treatment. She sends her apologies. I'm the owner of 193 East Street in Greytown, otherwise previously known as the Greytown Hospital. I'd like to put forward first a timeline of events of how we got here to put everything into context. So on June the 16th of 2023, I received an authored letter from the South Wairarapa District Council stating our home was nominated for heritage status. This was from Kendall Hammond, Planning Manager. It's important to understand the position of Planning Manager. It was nobody from an underlying position within the council. It was directly from the Planning Manager. The correspondence was extremely clear. I'm going to abridge a lot of the correspondence to make it through time quicker.
We have full copy.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So paragraph 8 was based on the assessment as proposed to include the building in the heritage schedule if you agree. Quite clear. If you agree. Can you please respond to confirm whether you are happy to have this included or let us know if you have any comments or questions? I replied instantly the same day, within an hour of receiving the correspondence. No is our answer. Absolutely and irrefutably, we do not want our house having any heritage status at all. We do not agree in any shape or form of being included in any heritage protection whatsoever. Kindly, on June the 22nd, Kendall replied, I've passed on your email to the district plan review team and they are aware that you do not wish for your property to be included in the register. Just to provide some clarity, again, the position of planner is important here. Just to provide some clarity, if you do not agree that your property be included in the schedule, we will not recommend it for it to be included further in the proposed district plan. I responded that day as well through courtesy. Thanks again, Kendall. I have forwarded your documents to my legals for reference. Please advise planning that I strongly disagree with my home being nominated for any and all types of heritage protection or heritage status in any form whatsoever. Thank you for your assistance with this matter. What I would like to point out is I believe, in my own personal opinion, that that clearly shows a failure of process for us to be here today. This clearly demonstrates that the process and due process was not adhered to, and a failure of communication has led us to this point. Had planning removed my home from the district plan as stated above by not receiving my written permission as the landowner, the matter would not have proceeded to where we are today. The submission. To give an outline on the submission that was made on my home. It is a single submission. It is not several or multiple. It is a single and very brief submission. There has been no government submission, no corporate submission, no iwi submission, or no other individual submissions. Just a single submission by a local interest group, the Greytown Heritage Trust, who are made up of individuals who have no recognised authority with the South Wairarapa District Council. They have no recognised authority with Heritage New Zealand. They have no recognised authority with the New Zealand government. They have no legal representation through local iwi, no recognition from Masterton Lands Trust, not even Cobblestones Museum. Greytown Heritage Trust did not isolate my home of singular importance. It is part of what seems to be a blanket submission of 67 pages affecting commercial buildings, churches, houses, fences, gateways, memorials, flues and chimneys, trees, and particularly the Heritage Precinct. What is important to reflect upon here is my home is not inside the Heritage Precinct. My home is not on the main street, State Highway 2, therefore not seen by 21,000 cars per day driving through Greytown. My home is not part of the Central Township streetscape. The original hospital that has Historic Places Trust status has been removed from the site. It is numbered NZHPT 4002. It was removed from the hospital grounds and relocated to Cobblestones Museum. In 1974, this building was moved to Cobblestones Museum site, carefully restored, and subsequently added to the New Zealand Historic Places Trust register as a Category 2 heritage building. Additionally, on the 29th of December of 2009, Cobblestones has received $23,971.76 from the Greytown District's Land Trust, South Wairarapa District Council, Lions, Rotaries, Friends of St John, Heritage New Zealand, and the Cobblestones Museum Trust. 3 years of restoration and renovation work was carried out, and this is a quote from the heritage site. The original heritage protected hospital is now located at Cobblestones. The original heritage protected hospital is now located at Cobblestones. None of these same above organisations saw any heritage merit whatsoever in saving the 1915 brick hospital as it sat empty for a decade of being vandalised and dismantled with theft rife of the doors, floorboards, over 1/3 of the entire floor was stolen, 57 broken windows, 300 square metres of bats, all copper pipes, radiators, every piece of cable, fireplace surrounds and mantles, including the front ornamental gates that was stolen. In fact, police eventually gave up trying to protect this place as it was a heavy drain on resources. On the 22nd of June 2012, the South Wairarapa District Council granted a resource consent for the subdivision and demolition. Subdivision and demolition. A copy is attached as part of the evidence previously supplied. Abridged from that is, needed to be removed. Some demolition required, in a deteriorated condition with no existing rights. No parties are considered to be adversely affected by the proposal. It then went on to section 3 part 2 of the granted resource consent. The subdivision would require structures to be demolished. Buildings are not in use. It is considered that the proposal was consistent with sustainable resource management and would not adversely affect any matters of national importance. and would not affect council's obligation under the Treaty of Waitangi, given the buildings are in generally poor state and it is currently an abandoned site. Conditions. This is important because there was an assessment made in 2012. The conditions are only one, surrounding demolishing of buildings. Any demolition within the drip line of trees require a qualified arborist. We acknowledge there are historical trees and adhere to qualified arborists trimming them. So on the site when an assessment was done, heritage trees were noted. The buildings had no notification whatsoever, no merit, no value. On June the 26th of 2012, the Wairarapa Times Age wrote an in-depth article, and in paragraph 10 it clearly states, from the information of the LIM and PIM from the South Wairarapa District Council, it will be up to new property owners whether the old hospital buildings are restored or demolished. None have heritage status, although there are 5 notable trees. My comment is, so the trees were identified as notable and the buildings had no heritage status and no heritage protection was afforded at that time. On the 18th of November, I contacted the gentleman who actually saved the hospital himself, Mr. Rudy Van Baal, Director of Molesworth Homes Development. He's also contributed 150 sections to this town and Carterton as well. As many of you may know, I built the Glade, I helped build Hartley Ave, Max Lane, numbers 191 to 197 Lincoln Road. So I'm the Director of Affordable Housing, the prequel to Kaingora. Rudy's statement was, quote, Rudy's also a board member of the Master Builders Association, has won Builder of the Year on multiple occasions. I would not have purchased the hospital site in East Street had it had any heritage protection or status at all. The site had no heritage protection or status, which enabled the resource consent to be granted by the SWDC to demolish buildings and hallways as required, as the buildings were interconnected across the site. So not only that, my building was connected to every other building. I believe that this shows insufficient significance for heritage status. The above clearly presents there is not enough evidence to support heritage status, as not a single government accredited organisation of local government or iwi has warranted any heritage status at any level whilst processing multiple building permits, historic building removal, hospital closure or demolition, a subdivision for resource consent, code of compliance for my home as a standalone residential dwelling, swimming pool consents, garaging at the rear is all brand new, plus the consent for use as a wedding centre in 2021, not once stimulated any heritage status whatsoever from the local authority or any other government organisation during the resource consent approval process. Can demonstrate punitive damage and economic loss of value with diminished saleability. Attached is a letter from Mr. Robert Slater, a qualified valuer and regional manager of the Wairarapa, Tremaines and Sotheby's real estate franchises. His quote is, "Properties that have a heritage protection will always attract a smaller pool of potential purchasers due to the restrictions placed on the property. These restrictions also have a negative impact on the property that result in a significant reduction in the sales value. Our home has been on the market now for 2 years. We understand it is a unique property. It will only appeal to a small pool of buyers in the first place, who then must also financially be able to participate in the sales process. As Robert has stated, this would greatly diminish the pool of buyers yet again and decrease the value considerably. A 30% drop in sales value would be in excess of $1 million at this level. My home currently has a GV of 3.3 million. This clearly demonstrates there would be negative financial impact through heritage status being applied. I'd like to reflect upon the personal history. My wife and I were extremely diligent when we purchased the site in 2013. Our investigation was thorough and resulted in multiple documents, including South Wairarapa District Council property records showing clearly no heritage status was applied to the site. We would never have purchased the site had there been any form of heritage status or heritage protection or heritage restrictions. We have invested a considerable sum in excess of 1.2 million on our home to restore it to an absolute highest standard that can be attained over a long 7-year restoration period. We have additionally invested over $100,000 on garaging and $120,000 on a swimming pool area. We would not have invested at all had we known heritage status would be sought. No chemicals or paint stripper was used, and all paint removed was carried out by hand to preserve the tannins and oils in the existing timber. This was brought to my attention by the late Peter King, who came in and gave me plenty of advice, with plenty of other masons as well that assisted with donations of timber and work on site. The panel must be aware that all skirtings had been removed, with over a third of the entire floor, all fittings and fixtures, every doorknob, every radiator, every stick of copper pipe, the hot water cylinders, doors were stolen, pink bats, even the window latches had been stolen. Everything else that remained had been vandalised. The police came to say thank you when I bought the place and to inform me of the activities that had taken place while it was abandoned. And if I may divest from my previous submission, we found 40 bourbon and cola cans in our building. We found a methamphetamine pipe up the chimney. People had defecated next to the toilets. There were used condoms throughout the building. This is important because this is 250 metres from a co-ed college, right? No one was coming forward to save this building. It was being used for spurious activity. Many neighbours also came to see me personally to thank me for fitting security measures to the sites, including security lights as well as CCTV and security signage to deter vagrants from assembling at site at night. As I say, it's occurred 250 metres from the college. We're incredibly proud of what we have created. We are the exact people who not only have the desire and ability to restore a building of this scale, but we are also financially able to. Heritage status would have been far too restricted for my wife and I personally. I do not know of anybody else who would take on a task of this magnitude had there been heritage protection in any form. We feel incredibly disappointed that we are here at this point in proceedings at all. In the very first instance, the South Wairarapa District Council clearly stated if we did not agree to the submission or give our permission in writing, the submission would be removed from the plan. We could not have been any clearer in our response. No is our answer. It will always remain our answer. Absolutely and irrefutably, we do not want our house having any heritage status at all. We do not agree in any shape or form of being included in heritage protection now or in the future. To amplify my frustration, South Wairarapa Council confirmed that by email that the review team are aware that you do not wish for your property to be included in the register. And during their response, they replied, we will not recommend this to be included going forward in the proposed district plan. As you can clearly see from the timeline, no other national authority has recognised the warranting of any form of heritage status on our home from 1915 until a local self-interest group, a simple formed trust with no legal authority, made a submission to the proposed district plan. The submission does not provide any great scope for the implementation of heritage status. It certainly does not provide a comprehensive report. That's important. It does not provide a comprehensive report. What's more important, no on-site inspection or assessment has ever been carried out. Any assessment to date would be via the internet information or a glance from the street at best. Heritage New Zealand did not support the submission or make any comment regarding the building's need for heritage status, nor did local iwi. Neither did 11,740 Wairarapa district locals, 10 people from a self-interest trust. Important this. In closing, my submission, as the owner of this property, we have delivered the message clearly, concisely and immediately that we as property owners did not give our written permission in the first instance for inclusion of our home in this entire process. We do not believe there is any in-depth comprehensive evidence provided to specifically establish that there should be any heritage status applied. We have demonstrated there will be financial loss and that saleability will be reduced to an even smaller group of potential buyers. I would like to take this time to thank today the hearings panel to hear my submission, where I hope I have provided you with enough information to assist you with your decision not to apply any heritage status to my home located at 193 East Street.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smock. I think before we go to questions, we might hear from Mr. Hooper first, and then we can put the questions to both of you simultaneously. So, Mr. Hooper, we've all read your evidence. There's a little bit of, and this is not a criticism, there's a little bit of commonality and duplication between what your client said and what you say, but you want to take us through the salient points of your statement?
Yeah, I'll take the evidence as read.
Yes,
But I do have some key points that I would like to.
please do.
Yeah. Okay. So we've heard from Mr. Smock and how this listing has affected him in his day-to-day life. It is a real thing that he is, trying to sell the property, and it's impeding that. So this submission centres around Mr. and Mrs. Smock's property rights and basic expectation that they can rely on the council's schedule of heritage items as a part of their due diligence in purchasing and investing in property. Establishing that the building had no council heritage status was a deciding factor in the decision to buy and renovate the building. And what they did was they chose to invest at a very high level and bring the property up to a very high standard. So for council to then add the building to the heritage schedule after they had purchased and renovated is simply not fair. It's important to note that the submitters are not seeking that their home is removed from an existing list. They are opposing their home being added to the schedule. The submitters have listed trees on their site, as Ryan noted, and completely accept this because they are aware of them when they purchased the property. The fact that the building has some heritage value is not disputed. This is what attracted the submitters to the property. However, there are a large number of non-listed older buildings in Greytown and the wider district that, because of their architecture and age, could also be deemed to have heritage value. Not every building with heritage value needs to be formally protected by the district plan. In renovating the building to such a high standard, the submitters have ensured the protection of the building. And this morning, Mr. Kernahan noted that he felt the building was safe. If the council was of a mind to list buildings against the owner's will, in my opinion, the heritage value of the building would need to be extremely high to justify this. And it is acknowledged that Mr. Kernahan has noticed that the building has enough heritage value to be on the list. However, in my view, the building does not have a high enough heritage value for a home to be listed against the owner's will. And I base this view on the following. The building has had plenty of opportunity to have been included on the list. And I note that Mr. Kernahan confirmed that this morning, that the building had previously been considered for protection, but this was rejected. This further confirms that the submitters should have been able to make investment decisions based on the planning laws at the time. Heritage New Zealand not supporting the listing is important. And the submitters rightfully ask, if the building was not listed previously, why now? If the answer to this question is because the renovations undertaken to the building have enhanced its heritage value, which Mr. Kernahan confirmed this morning, then the submitters are actually being penalised for their heritage restoration work. If people are afraid that a quality renovation may lead to future heritage listing, then this has the potential to have adverse effects on heritage, the very reverse of what council is seeking. In respect of Ms. Adams' officer's summary statement, I'll just make the following points. Section 6 lists the protection of historic heritage from inappropriate subdivision, use and development as a matter of national importance. Ms. Adams states that the proposed plan's inconsistent approach when buildings have been listed against owners' wishes but trees have not been is because notable trees are not captured by Section 6. Ms. Adams also states that the Joint Planning Committee decided to list identified buildings against owners' wishes due to responsibilities under Section 6 of the RMA. I disagree that trees are not captured by Section 6. In my opinion, a significant aspect of the value of large trees is through a connection with our past, our heritage, and therefore trees can have heritage value and are therefore captured by Section 6. The notable trees section of the proposed plan sits within the historical and cultural values chapter of the proposed plan. There are also many references to the heritage value of trees in the notable tree section of the proposed plan. With both buildings and trees captured under Section 6, there is no reason to treat the approach to listing heritage trees and buildings any differently. In addition, in the officer's summary statement, Ms Adams implies that Council is bound by Section 6 and Policy 21 of the RPS to list the submitter's home. There are already 172 listed buildings or items, 358 listed trees, and 4 heritage precincts in the South Wairarapa district alone. This fulfills Council's responsibilities under Section 6 and the RPS, and there is no requirement for the hearings panel to list the submitter's home. Ms Adams acknowledges the work the submitters have undertaken to restore the building and any economic loss or difficulty selling, but notes that these are matters that are not considered under the RMA process. I disagree with this. In seeking a fair and reasonable outcome, the economic implications and loss of property rights are absolutely able to be factored into the panel's decision whether to list the submitter's home or not. This is a legitimate part of the Section 32 analysis, and in my opinion, with the renovation complete and the benefits of this do not justify the costs in this circumstance. So the decision Mr. and Mrs. Smock are requesting from the hearings panel is that 193 East Street is removed from Schedule 1. Not because the property has no heritage value, but because the heritage value is not high enough to justify the removal of property rights and reduction in ability to sell and sales value. As a final point, with heritage provisions having immediate effect, the building has had heritage status since last October and will continue to do so until the hearings panel releases decisions, putting the Smocks in a state of limbo. It would be appreciated if the hearings panel would consider releasing the decision on this single matter ahead of decisions on the entire plan. This will not impact on any other aspects of the proposed plan and will allow the submitters to.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, Mr. Hooper, you were reading from a prepared statement there, which
Yes.
Would you be kind enough to email a copy of that to Ruth so that I tried to take as many notes as I could along the way, but you've touched on some matters that were in addition to your evidence sheet, so would benefit from having that. Yeah, that was in addition to that. Okay, we'll open up for questions. Alistair, do you want to start?
I might as well. Yes. Right, Mr. Hooper, I just would like to ask a question in a different way than I asked this morning, because you'd heard. Section 6 of the RMA means we have to give effect to heritage. Would you consider that the SNCs have actually given effect to that very piece of legislation by the significant investment that they have done in the house, thereby protecting it for future?
Well, they have, yeah. Yep. As Mr. Kearney pointed out this morning, that
So
enhanced the property and it's
so we don't need, so in your submission and in your evidence, we don't need to use Section 6 to protect the building, that by their very investment they have done that anyway.
yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Brian?
Brian?
I think it was pretty much the same, but I think just reading the evidence is your investment is probably, would you agree, greater than what you would do if you were just going to preserve it for heritage?
Certainly.
Yes.
Certainly. And as a developer, there was an instant there where I thought, I can get 8 houses onto there into Greytown. But there was too much work that had been done by too many professionals before me, too many crafted, gifted apprentices and workmen, and I wanted to restore their work and pay homage to it.
Thank you.
Fraser? No, fine. No, so Craig, raise the question. Robin?
Right, thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple. Just want to acknowledge the contrary communication issue. The joint hearings panel will have to take some responsibility for that. And Ms Adams, who inherited this situation, it wasn't of her doing, acknowledged at paragraph 17 how that came about. Certainly, it was something that the joint panel did grapple with. In the end of the day, and Mr. Hooper might appreciate this, Section 6 prevailed in terms of the notification of the plan, but on the clear understanding that there would be a full opportunity for property owners and other parties to lodge submissions supporting the listings. It was unfortunate that that earlier communication went out, but it did. All we can do is apologise.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
It's not the way that the joint committee wanted to do business, and it was just unfortunate the way it transpired. Can I just check a couple of matters of fact with you, Mr. Smock? First of all, when did you purchase the property in 2013?
Correct.
And there's a 6 to 7 years of restoration.
Correct.
And when did you first put the property on the market?
November 2022.
November 2022. Okay. Years ago. And completely up to you if you want to provide this information or not, but what sort of interest did you get in that first month or two?
We've had significant interest. Obviously we're at a high end of the market.
Yes.
So it's a significant investment, so it reduces the amount of buyers. Since then, we've had the implementation of the debt to income ratios as well, where no New Zealanders are allowed more than 6 times their annual taxable salary in debt. Yeah. So it certainly provides a barrier. And also our initial interest was from international buyers.
Yes.
Many may know that I work in the film industry. Brought Narnia and Disney to this country. So a lot of the people from the film industry are interested in moving there, as we've also got James Cameron and Mr. Taylor and Mr. Jackson all living in the Wairarapa as well. So it suits the film industry.
How would you categorise the level of interest in that first year of marketing?
I would say significant, but it's the amount of people who can then transfer and be part of the sales process.
Right. Now, these aren't trick questions.
Oh, sure.
Anyway, the plan was notified October 2023. Did you notice any drop off in new interest?
I've had no interest.
No interest since?
No interest at all.
That was the second year of marketing.
Correct.
You want to speculate why that might be?
Well, several things. Obviously, the DTI implementation, the election, high interest rate economy, Mr. Peters from New Zealand First bringing in the foreign buyers ban. That deterred a lot of international buyers. That significantly, obviously, has affected the amount of people moving to Australia. And if I may add, since my submission has been made, and I wanted to confirm that I had this correct, if I may add something from this point forward. So on the 11th of October, the Minister of Culture and Heritage, Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development met with the Voluntary Heritage Group to discuss the RMA2 bill. Obviously, this hasn't come into effect now, but this is what they're currently working on. 2024, isn't it? Yes, correct. This is just literally a month ago. So Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Culture, Heritage, Ministry of the Environment, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development met with the Voluntary Heritage Board to discuss RMA2 bill, which includes heritage for residences must have owners' written permission as part of the new bill. This is currently being worked on furiously. I have this from Chris Bishop himself, who is working on it furiously. On this bill, has been driven as a matter of fact, that Hamilton Council this year had a proposal for 3,000 new heritage designated houses across 32 new heritage sites. This is basically being weaponised so that people and NIMBYs can stop any other type of housing intensification within these areas. Of the 3,000 houses in Hamilton, 600 estate houses that back onto another estate of 1,000 houses. So where they fall into the leafy suburbs, this heritage type of protection and submissions is being weaponised. And currently, as I say, going through the House and the new part of the RMA2 bill, I understand it hasn't been implemented at this time, but that's on the horizon.
And look, the panel's aware of that. Obviously, it's not in front of us at the moment, and until it is, we can't give any consideration to it. But you're quite right to point it out. Just sticking to some of the factual questions. Were you aware? Okay. Mr. Kernahan indicated that he's been involved in this site since pre-2010. He recommended the inclusion of the site in 2008, 2009 as part of the first production of the combined district plan. His recommendation was not accepted, and the site was not registered in the first combined Wairarapa district plan. So, were you aware of that?
No, not at all. And it doesn't show up on any of the PIMs or LIMs from the South Wairarapa District Council. I would say that any information that never made it through into the final reading was negated.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Smock. Mr. Hooper, I've got a couple of questions for you. You're going to email the statement. Look, this is just an observation. Your statement of evidence, apart from what you presented today, focused largely on the property and fairness, property rights component. It's fair to say there wasn't a lot of planning in your initial statement. In particular, there was no real analysis of Section 6, policies 21 or 22 of the RPS. What's the reason for that? It's not a trick question. I just want to understand why you focused on one aspect and not both.
I think, I mean, if council really wanted to, they could bulldoze through this and list a house under Section 6. But I think it comes down to fairness, really. That's the whole crux of it.
Have you had a look at policies 21 and 22 of the regional policy statement?
Yes.
What's your understanding of what they require council to do?
Oh, identify and protect heritage.
Yes. What's the onus on the council in terms of the RPS and the district plan? What's the functional relationship between the two?
Well, the district plan needs to give effect to the RPS.
Okay. Would delisting the site give effect to the RPS?
It hasn't been listed. Okay.
Proposed listing would.
Well, I think for the reasons we've been through, it doesn't need any heritage listing to be, to continue and give heritage value.
Yeah, you and I think your client both acknowledge the heritage value. Right, you were here this morning when Mr. Coonan elaborated on that, and what I think what the panel took from that, there's two aspects: is the heritage value from the site in terms of its social and heritage history, and then there's the buildings themselves and their architectural significance. Mr. Kernahan is of the view that collectively they have considerable heritage value. You've drawn a distinction between buildings that have some value and those that have significant value, and that those that don't have significant value are more perhaps amenable to not having listings of where the property owners don't agree. Is that a sort of a synopsis of what you were saying?
Yes, I think if the council was going to list a building against the owner's will, it would need to meet a very high threshold of heritage value.
Where do we find that support, the statutory and policy support for that approach?
I think that just comes down to what's fair and reasonable.
If I may, why is my building singled out of 6 buildings that were all joined and interconnected? Yeah. This is an entire site. And then what concerns me is the ongoing heritage being applied for infinitum moving forward.
Yes.
If we've already got one heritage hospital that's deeply protected with a heritage status being picked up, moved at great expense, restored at great expense as part of a museum is on show, then how can the resulting remaining buildings then have heritage? And how long will it be until Five Rivers or the next doctor's office gets heritage protection?
I understand what you're saying. Panel need to make a call on this based on the evidence presented, and there's a contest obviously at the moment between yourself as submitter and the position of the council. Now, Ms Adams has said that she's prepared to revisit her original recommendation, her 42, based on what comes out of today's proceedings. If you like, her soft recommendation or a recommendation from a 42A was that the listing be retained, but she's got an open mind to hearing that. So we and her need some further analysis in terms of a Section 32 assessment, which shows what the costs and benefits are of not retaining or retaining the listing. Mr. Hooper's gone some way to that today through his supplementary statement. But I think I need to say to you, I think we need to have that documented more robustly.
It's something I can provide when I email through the.
Yes, you understand what I'm saying. Certainly there's the tension between fairness and property rights on one hand, which you've made a very solid case for, Mr. Small, and the statutory obligations on this panel under Section 6 and policies 21 and 22 are at loggerhead. And what I've said to Ms Adams is, how are you going to resolve this? What is the policy framework to assist you in resolving that? And I'm saying that to Mr Hooper now. We need the same from him. If you want to get together and produce a joint approach to that, that's fine. But I certainly need, we need that from both of you to make a final call on this matter. And Mr Hooper, you understand what a Section 32 assessment is. It's bringing together everything that we've heard. It's like a planning balance sheet, like Mr Smock weighs everything up, and it gives an answer and something that we can rely on either way. Yeah,
Can I just expand on that, Mr. Hooper? Could you, when you do that, could you put a bit of effort into the risk assessment of applying with policy 21 and 22, as opposed to not, given the significant financial investment, as we heard from Mr. Kernahan, the risk level in this particular property of something going wrong and a heritage thing is extremely low, given the huge financial investment. That's how you sort of put it, to say, you know, when I asked you earlier about have we actually achieved the heritage protection because of what the family has done with the house against the actual the legislative requirement. So are we achieving the legislative requirement without using the legislation, and the risk of not doing so is what I'm really interested in.
Really, the risk of not acting, i.e. not listing, ameliorated by the situation that's peculiar to this particular property. And that applies to Ms Adams also. Any further questions of the submitter?
No.
No. Mr Smock and Mr Hooper, thank you for your really considered presentation. You've certainly given a lot of food for this panel. We look forward to receiving that. I'd have to put a time frame on it, Mr Hooper. Really want it before close of business on the 20th.
Yeah, that's fine.
But if you feel that you need more time, let us know. It's an important issue. So
Preference be that I combine that with.
in an ideal world, there'll be some agreement, and you know, even if you get together and discuss it first and the statutory framework, we're really lacking an assessment of policy 22. Policy 21 is clear, need to identify. Policy 22 says district and regional plans shall include policies and rules and methods that protect the heritage values from inappropriate subdivision. So the listing of that is one way of achieving that. Are there other ways outside the district plan to do that? Or is the circumstances so unique that this policy doesn't apply to this particular property?
Yeah, in my view, it applies to heritage in general. So the existing listings cover that off, but we can go.
Why not suggest that you have an initial meeting together and see whether there's some common position. If there's not, then each prepare your own section 32 analysis and submit that. And again, if you think you need more time, we'll be more than happy to grant it, given that nothing's really going to happen over the Christmas period. But I know that the more time we give, the more time it takes. So you might be best to do this while it's fresh in your mind.
Do you have a comment on the decision?
I haven't discussed that with the panel, and we have to give some careful thought to that, because it might be easy to make a decision in isolation on that request. It might have some unintended consequences. Yeah. Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you too.
Yes. Well, I'm a bit late. Is Warren Rary?
Why?
It's in the back.
Warren? Hello, Warren.
So,
Come on up, Warren.
Segue into.
yeah, I think she will. I think she can accept what you're saying. She has no predictions.
Yeah.
That one's good.
I made my point.
Grab a seat, Warren, and make yourself comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And all. Heritage.
Hey, Warren, we're really in your hands. What would you like to tell us?
Pardon?
What would you like to tell us about your submission?
Oh. In Masterton, at the dump, there was a marae up there,
Yes.
and they covered it. And then Nursery Road, there was a upa, and they put the road through it.
When was this, Warren?
Pardon?
When did this happen?
Oh, years ago.
Yep. Yes, carry on.
What I think is council should put a memorial there in those two places, because you can't do anything else. But acknowledge it. And the other one is the road going past my place and past those two places. It's called Te Whiti Road.
Very right, yeah.
Te Whiti Road is further out. And that area there is Mangakura. There used to be a marae on Mangakura on that road. Wanted it changed to Mangakura Road.
Have you discussed
Pardon?
the idea of a memorial with the council?
I know. No, they told me to come in here.
Okay. Interesting. We don't have any jurisdiction any control over that sort of matter. That would be for the individual council themselves to make that decisions.
I don't know why they sent me here then.
I don't know either. But you've obviously lodged a submission, number 64.
So wants to name change, which is another council.
Yes. We'll just check with Kiriana and Joe. Do you have any questions for the submitter? No? Any questions about the road, the memorial? No?
No.
Okay.
CEO, Māori manager of PWC
At
Aston District.
okay.
Being.
Want to mention that?
Oh, kia ora matua. Have you had a chance to catch up with Leanne Corona? Leanne Corona from the Masterton District Council.
Oh, I don't know. I was talking to someone. They sent me here.
Okay.
Kia ora, pass it on.
We'll pass that on to Leanne.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for turning up.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So I'm just going through your submission again, and one of the things you say here, identifying cultural areas. So are you asking for the old sites to be notified as sites of significance?
Yeah.
That's what you're asking for. Okay, right. So, okay, now we know why you've been sent here.
Okay, so both sites
Yes.
Yeah, and the road, name change on the road.
and the road name. Yep.
So you want the
Nothing to do with
Marae, the Wairarapa, and the road name. Those are the three things you're here for, yeah?
Okay.
Warren, was there two marae you were talking about or just one?
There's two. There was one I'm talking about, but there was two.
Yes, yeah.
It was only at the dump, over the top of it.
Gotcha.
Right.
Thank you, Warren.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alistair. Is the Greytown Heritage Trust here, Carmel Ferguson? Oh, no, you're not Carmel. And you are Sir
So I'm Peter Rowlands.
Peter Rowlands,
Yeah. ROWLANDS.
LANDS.
Yeah.
And you're a member of the Greytown Heritage Trust?
Yeah.
Do you hold a position there?
Just a trustee.
Trustee? Have you got any prepared material, Mr. Rowlands?
Yeah, I have.
And only one copy,
Only one copy.
right? Would you mind emailing that to Ruth
No, of course.
at the end
Sure.
of the station?
Sure.
Please feel free to read it.
Okay, I'll do a slight preamble, and I'll do a preamble with a reason because I want to come back to it. We're a voluntary body engaged with local history, championing the built and natural environments of Greytown and South Wairarapa. We're voluntary, but we're not without expertise. In our numbers, we include a significant architect, until recently chair of the Architects Registration Board, an advisory specialist heritage architect, a town planner, an award-winning landscape designer, an organisational development specialist, a researcher writer, several business people, and some of those own and operate businesses locally in Greytown. For each and every one of those individuals, the status and development of the town matters. Our engagement is both considered and informed. I've said this before at a previous submission, which is that we're not driven by a notion of preserving Greytown in aspect, but in intelligently planning and supporting development to safeguard the aesthetic and cultural values of New Zealand's first purpose-planned inland town. A town that stands as unique and extraordinary, built and natural landscapes included. And also, I guess, of enormous relevance too is Papawai as part of that cultural landscape. We've been exceptionally grateful for the considered and detailed attention to our submission to the district plan. We're pleased with a large number of matters that have been recommended and accepted by the officer, and we found that really very gratifying. There are a couple of instances where we remain strongly at variance, and we also have a third challenge that we'd like to raise. We note the continuing decision not to list the former St Andrew's Presbyterian Church, which was moved from 4 Delta Greytown in 2009. We continue to campaign for this one-time church being scheduled as a heritage building. It's a very good example of a sympathetic insertion on Main Street, which actually protects the lime trees and respects the old BNZ building. There's great synchronicity in its placement. We accept that it's not original to the site, but it is a building of merit and history. It's also a history that's available and formally recorded, and Canterbury University holds that history. We accept, as I've said, that it's not original to the site. But New Zealand's shaped by buildings removed, recited and repurposed. The very reason often for their reciting is that they have merit and palpable history. This church building sits significantly in the Greytown streetscape. We would very much like this decision revisited. A second point is HHP 5, earthquake strengthening, fire protection, accessibility. The officer disagrees with our suggested addition to the policy to include internal work. If this policy is intended to apply to any Schedule 1 building where internal elements are important, then we would reiterate that this remains important for specific reference in the policy and for the reasons outlined in our written submission. The Trust is concerned that heritage is being considered as the external features only, and that consideration needs to be given to how important internal features are protected. And I think we'd make the point here that internal renovation is subject to changing legislation and changing fashion. And there's the potential for losses when we don't monitor or handle those changes with care and attention.
It was policy 5.
It was policy 5, yes. It should be sorry, I've lost my plot here. Yeah, we feel that consideration needs to be given to how important features are protected. In addition, referring to item 3, the work should be as non-invasive as possible, a light touch, reversible, and not interfere with the heritage fabric, which is best heritage. To do otherwise is to see our building heritage as simply a matter of veneers, and we're aware that the officer has rejected that assessment, but we stick with that judgment and suggestion.
What would you have item 3 say instead? At the moment, it talks about minimising, I think, of additions.
Well, we would like to add, where possible, things are reversible, and not to interfere with the heritage fabric. I mean, we're aware that what's assumed here is that the rules for interiors only apply where they've been assessed and listed in Schedule 1. Danger is then the oversight.
I think I need some clarification. I think that is intentional, but I need some clarification on that. If the listing doesn't include the internal aspects, then they are not captured by the rules. That's the panel's understanding,
right,
of the way the mechanics work on the plan.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
It's an uncomfortable one.
Yeah,
because there's the losses, the potentials for losses there are considerable.
Right. But you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Well, firstly, I'd like that confirmed in the right of reply. And secondly, we would need to have scope through a submission to change that.
Change it, yeah.
That was your second policy 5, and you said there was a third.
Right, the third one is slightly more contentious. And that's the notion of a design panel. Importantly, we would like the district to consider its relationship and use of the Heritage Trust. It's too easy to indulge us, I think, as a peripheral body of well-meaning but inconsequential voices, what I call a caricatured cohort of ladies and gentlemen who lunch. There's genuine expertise and knowledge of a small town that's a considerable force in the economic life and the tourism appeal of South Wairarapa. Our anxiety is that clumsy planning, compromised local knowledge or aesthetic inertia will quickly risk the charm of a small town that's a beacon alongside places such as Arrowtown, Russell, the Kerikeri Basin, places that reflexively have consulted with local historians and campaigners over time. The Kerikeri Basin was due to be entirely redeveloped for housing, had it not been for the campaign work of Nancy Pickmere and Joyce Mason. Beyond the campaign, the Preservation Group, who have the clumsy acronym of SPOXA, became pivotal in all planning issues in the area. Kerikeri Basin stands today carefully curated, protected, and an accessible resource for everyone, local and tourist alike, and latterly a World Heritage Site. I'm not claiming that for Greytown, but I think we're deeply aware that it's, without being precocious or precious about it, it's architecturally an exceptionally interesting small town in New Zealand. Arrowtown employs a design panel. This is something GHT has suggested previously, but was disallowed as part of the plan review process. The Arrowtown panel includes a registered architect and a landscape architect, a heritage expert, and someone from the Arrowtown Heritage Group, the latter two possibly being one and the same person. The council gets a report from this group for each proposal in the heritage zone, feeding into the planner's report. Greytown Heritage Trust would like such practice to be part of the planning consultation and to be a voice for SWDC as review support, and that this should be embedded as a significant arrangement. That we're a notifiable agency. The Trust has always included an architect, registered or retired, on the Trust who can comment. The expertise is informed and robust. Yara.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. I've just been reading ahead, and I think I've possibly answered my own question, but Rule 3 says that activities are permitted. These are alterations, additions, and partial demolition. The alterations are only permitted, so subject to the alterations only and being undertaken to the interior of the scheduled building where the interior is not specifically listed. That would suggest that if the interior is listed, then those sort of alterations are
Safeguarded, yes. Yeah.
Okay, let me see if, excuse me, we have any questions on your 3 matters. Start down to Craig. Is it? Right? No. Alistair? Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, kia ora. In relation to the group of volunteers that make up the Greytown Heritage Trust, and wanting the involvement, at the moment you have some experts in the industry. What happens when your membership changes and perhaps you just end up with well-being, passionate members of the community who come on, and then there are no longer anybody with any expert knowledge, and your suggestion is that your trust is consulted with on any developments and so forth. If you no longer have any professionals or experts in that group and it's just well-meaning volunteers, do you see that could be in the future a potential issue?
I do, but I counter that fairly kind of robustly, in the sense that the trust is now 30 years old, and in all that time it has always had experts on the panel. For instance, there's always been an architect as part of that group. And we actively, and we have just done so recently, we recruit on the basis of expertise. One of the things we have talked about, and it would pivot on a heightened relationship with SWDC, is embedding some of this in our constitution, so that we're not simply recruiting people who have a vague interest, but that we've got that expertise represented.
Thank you.
I think that's a question. Just following it. Do you believe that you have the support of the community of Greytown?
I think that's a good question, and I think it's a mixed question. I think it's a loaded question. I think in some places there's considerable support. In other places, I think there is misunderstanding and some resistance. I think there are individuals who imagine that the trust is empowered in some way, where it is only an advisory body. I also think there have been some sea changes over the last year that have meant that our reputation has been considerably enhanced. And those two things would be the Woolworths campaign, which we had considerable support around, exceptional support around, and that took the form of hard cash to fund some of our expert witnesses. And the other is the programme of hosting our own version of Heritage Garden and House Tour, which allowed people to engage very directly with the heritage that is part of Greytown.
So you were sitting at the back when Mr. Snook gave us, so you heard his comments. You did a 96 page submission. Did your organisation, when it was doing that, did it approach any of the landowners of the buildings that you were submitting on?
Yes, yeah, many. And in fact, I'm just going through a process at the moment of reviewing and rewriting and re-researching a lot of the kind of heritage profiles that exist around the town. And that inevitably involves face-to-face conversations with people.
Okay, but it was done before you did your submission. So like
they've been ongoing. So it's a mixture. And I'm very aware of the particular submission that you've just heard. And I'm also really aware that there's some difficulty in that relationship. Okay.
Roland, just one question for me, and it's on your third matter, your self-proclaimed contentiousness of the design panel. Does the district plan have to be explicit on that? I mean, couldn't the council operate a design panel to assist with resource consents required under the district plan without the district plan actually signalling that?
I think it could, but I think there would have to be a quite explicit pledge, to make that real. I mean, I have quite recently been involved with a piece of negotiation around a particular development in Greytown of huge sensitivity, and which I know mattered to residents, and I was very aware of being sidelined quite quickly in that conversation. So it's a matter of the integrity of that.
How would you see the design panel operating in relation to the resource consent process?
I said
in tandem, or?
Yeah, I think it would be in tandem. I mean, I don't think, we don't think that the trust should be a decision-making body, but one that informs the people who make those decisions. We often hold information about history and about buildings that are not easily in the public arena.
Okay, understood. Okay, that was all for me. If you'd be kind enough to email through to Ruth that statement, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much. Is Ian and Marion Froud present?
Yeah.
I pronounced that name right?
Froud.
Froud.
Froud. F-R-O-W-D-E. Now, I do have copies of the submission.
Of the originals.
In short, do you want to?
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth. You'd like to read this?
Yes.
Ruth?
Right. Well, I'm, excuse me, I might have some of this magic water. Having a yellow water bottle is very handy. No one quite knows what's in it.
As long as you do.
And I'm Ian Froud, and with my wife Marilyn, we've owned 210 West Street for 20 years. We are grateful to David Kernahan, who has reviewed the case for granting heritage status on our property and has recommended do not list, having only marginal heritage value. We are highly supportive of this assessment, which is consistent with an assessment made in 2006, which stated do not list lacks significant overall heritage values. Quite frankly, why wouldn't it be the same? There's no change. The submission is in further support of our written submission for the rejection of heritage classification on our home made in April 2024. Of the 7 categories mentioned under Policy 21, only the section covering historical value, in our opinion, has a touch of merit. Can you please take into account the house is not associated with important themes in history or patterns of development, is not associated with important events. The building was shifted back right from the very front of the section in the 1980s and completely renovated and added to with only the frontage and 2 small bedrooms of the original home remaining. Many other similar styles exist in the region. No old outbuildings, chattels, or chimneys remain, and the house has modern facilities. While it is named after the Barrett family, Sam was a pound keeper, gaswork employee, and while he may have been a keen junk collector, as many of us are, we understand from inquiries made he was not a significant contributor to the community. Prior to our ownership, the land was subdivided and is now only 3/8 of an acre. There appears no special value archaeologically, architecturally, and technologically. The integrity values have been lost following substantial modification. When reviewing social values, the house has no particular association with a particular culture or group and is not symbolic for any commemorative purpose. It is not sacred to Tanga Whenua values. The style of the building is not rare within the district. In conclusion, I'd like to express our outrage at the situation we find ourselves in. It seems incomprehensible to us that no prior notice was given by the local Heritage Trust or the council of this proposal until we received notice from council that unless we put in a submission, our house would attract heritage status. Greytown is a small town, so why didn't the Heritage Trust discuss this with us to get our goodwill? And also because we're a member of the society. It feels like they have been working behind our backs. When you then take into account the historical significance is minor, the same proposal was declined in 2006, and the stress it's causing us as older citizens, it's a bit beyond the pale. The previous speaker indicated that the Heritage Trust would like more powers, and yet in this case they haven't had the decency to come and talk to us and get us on side.
Trust you will concur with David Kernahan's recommendation and not allow this business to be listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farad. Just before I go to questions, Ms. Adams, can you just remind the panel what your recommendation is in terms of this property?
To not list it.
Okay. Any questions, panel?
I'd like to ask one if I may.
Yes.
Thanks, Ian. I'm just really taken by the fact that you're a member of the Heritage Trust.
Yes.
And I just really want to test it because did you hear my question previously about the consultation of the Heritage Trust?
Yes.
96-page submission that they.
Yes.
You're a member of the trust. What was your understanding about how that submission was approved by the trust? Were the trust members involved in this, or was this just a select group from within the trust that submitted it?
A local ex-lawyer came around and reviewed sites that had a little notice on them, heritage status, heritage property.
Frank.
Yeah. And he recommended that our one should. Now, when this happened in 2006, we were concerned that the notice they had out there, because I mean, it does have a little bit of minor significance, and if people want to stop and have a look at it, that's fine. But you can't actually see much because it's behind a whole lot of trees. So we, at the time, there was this heritage notice, and then next thing we found, us and a number of other people with the same sort of notice were then up for being listed.
Stop for a minute. The siren goes off, but hard of hearing everybody. Three times. Three times it.
Oh, okay, right. So.
Wait.
Oh, right, okay.
That's for the recording, because otherwise.
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
And my old ears.
And
I was going to talk louder.
one on the panel.
Have another drink.
That's good.
Good on you.
So after, you're right.
2 more to go.
All right.
It's like living in the Blitz here, isn't it?
Yeah. So you don't walk on the road or on the footpath.
Yeah.
One more.
Look at this one too.
Yeah.
15 Udy Street.
Find it on.
My friend, see what they really like it.
Yeah.
Announcing your arrival, Jen.
I hear.
Okay, I think you're safe to carry on.
Right, so I've got to the stage where in 2006, they put this forward. And the other homes that we knew also had this heritage sign outside. So we removed that sign and about 3-4 years ago, a member from the association asked if we would consider putting that sign up. And we said, well, last time it was up. Next thing we found, we were sort of up for heritage status, which is not what we're after. And so he said, no, that won't happen. I assure you of that. So we allowed the sign to go up because, you know, they said the odd tourist comes along and it's good for the town and so on. And as I said, we are a member of the association, but I think that is the reason why we're now here today, going through this whole thing again.
So was there any consultation or agreement within the trust, like when the trust executive or whoever put the submission together, did they sit down with the trust members and say, this is what we're submitting on your behalf?
No.
Has the document been, has their submission been made public to the trust? Do you know within your organisation, or have they in retrospect said this is what we submitted on the district plan?
No one from the Historic Trust has contacted us in any way. It was a complete shock to us to suddenly find that unless we took some action, it was going to be listed.
Any further questions of Mr. Fry? Right.
Thank you for listen. I was interested to hear you talk about the heritage signs. Do you believe that is providing or has provided to the heritage group a quasi indicator of your acceptance? And not only for yourself, but for others as well?
Well, they may have interpreted that way, but we didn't certainly interpret it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Thank you for your presentation.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
I was one copy short. Does someone want another copy?
You hold on to that one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Ratner and Carol on this. Fairly unusual for us, Mr. Walters, to be on time, so come on up to the front.
I'm very impressed, sir. And I think that hopefully, first, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. And I think I can probably be quite brief in terms of the absolute submission on, if I have correctly understood both the recommendation of the council officer and the recommendation of the independent review, is both that our request that it be removed, the designation be removed, that they recommended that be accepted. So I'm hesitant to say anything that might change that.
Now, this is number 3 Udy Street, is that correct?
15 Udy.
15 Udy Street.
Udy Street.
Please just confirm that with Ms. Adams
Yes, 15.
and the recommendation.
Oh, to not list it.
Yes.
Well, that was quick.
Paragraph 182 of the 42A report.
You're welcome to leave it at that point. If there's anything else you want to add, you're welcome to, but
I think it's time to stop.
you're here.
Very much.
Thanks for coming along.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now you've put us well ahead of
Yeah.
Pleasure, sir. Oh, thank you for putting us ahead.
Is Jeremy Partridge present? No.
We've got Jen here. Dermot Tripp. Where are you, Jen?
45.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Raymond and Ms. Cooper, would you mind if we went with Jenny Boyne first? That's fine with you. Come on up, Jenny.
Thank you.
Just before you start, Ruth, would you mind contacting Ms. McLeod, Mr. Cooper, and Mr. Workman, and tell them we're running ahead of time, and also Francis Casey. And we'll probably be running about half an hour ahead of time. And if they're able to come in earlier, that would be appreciated. Thank you, Jenny.
I'm Jenny Boyne. My husband Alistair and I, we farm on the Tora Coast. So we're here for the SMAs. We're opposing the blanket approach to the sites of significance. We'd rather they, I know they're sensitive and all the rest of it, but where you've got one that goes in a rectangle, you've now got 14 houses along that area on our neighbour's subdivision. You've got a bit of bare land on our place. But it's just, how can you do blanket stuff?
When you say blanket, Jenny, what?
Literally, it's a rectangle above the road. So it's not below the road, it's not on the foreshore, it's just a rectangle, which I find hard to believe. A long skinny rectangle, which is already allowed multiple subdivisions on further to the south of us, which every time they put a house on there anyway, there's somebody that goes and makes sure that they don't pile down to somewhere. Fair enough. Got no objection to if we do modify things that you have someone on site, but the blanket approach, which you then modified to say, or it will be a is it polygram or something like that? Polygon, yeah, polygons. Yeah. So it's quite a long area of a polygon, which seems a wee bit inappropriate to us. And the other one was utilities, but I think you're allowing utilities to be managed, etc. So we've got cell phone towers and etc. on our property now, and one part of it there you said no to.
Some policy and rural relief for utilities. Just be aware that it's not we.
That's right. No. Yeah.
We're here to hear both arguments.
It's both for and against. Yeah.
Just going back to the SNA.
Yes.
Matter. Well, first of all, tell us a little bit about your property.
Okay, so we're it's a soldier settlement block, so it's 17,000 acres on Torres Station, which was cut up in 1950. So we've done continuous use on it. There is Wairarapa and power sites to the south, and those Wairaparas have been identified on. We've got an old map in our place. It's 1919, and they're on there. Yes. And I think they've identified some other areas to the south on Te Roy, and there's some to the north. But there's just this new line, this new circle, or this new polygon. So it just seemed a bit weird having one of those plonked in a long.
Okay. You're not opposed to the individual identification of.
Okay, to identify each area. Yeah.
But it's the areas in between that.
So it's just this whole blanket approach.
Okay, I understand what you mean by blanket approach now. Yeah. Okay. And you've. Excuse me, farming the block? Or?
Yeah, sheep and beef farming it, So it's not modified or anything, And
have you had a look at the rules that would apply under the polygon in terms of what activities that you undertake on a farming basis would be captured?
Well, I'm just frightened that as soon as you put something in that's allowed, all of a sudden that we're the only people out there that haven't subdivided in several blocks. Not that we want to subdivide, but also don't want to be, when the horse is already bolted, be repeated in any way.
So what would be the decision that you would want this panel to make?
I'd like them to identify the sites or narrow the sites down to specific areas, please.
Just check if there's any further questions.
Oh, Jen, just for what reason? I get David said if you read the rules and what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do.
Yeah.
And then if you want to identify the site, it's not going to be a lot different to the polygon. What you can.
It just seems it doesn't seem to be.
Well, you need some clarification.
More clarification. Yeah.
Okay, I get you.
Because we've got 3 different plans, which is really. Yeah, and a lot of people actually don't know that the combined district plan exists. Sorry, when I'm talking to people, they've got no idea.
It has existed since 2010.
I know, and before that, yeah.
Could I just point out something that Jenny's mother was involved in the very
original one? So I've read it from the word go. So it's over 20 years you've had this plan in. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But I was serious when I asked that question. Have you given any thought to how the rules would impact the farming operation, either on individual sites or on the areas in between under the polygon?
No, not for Well, the thing is, you've got this plan that's now in operation. So when the next person, if we don't come and say something now, so later on you'll go, oh, but you didn't say that you wanted something else, and someone else could come in and go, no farming.
Yeah,
we've already got constraints on beef farming on the coast.
Yes,
with waterways. So I'm just if I don't feel as I turn up here and go, I don't like it, then I can't say that or pointed it out. Yeah. So I haven't. The short answer is no. I haven't actually looked out the rules, but the rules do get changed quite a bit.
Well, the rules are a point in time.
That's right.
And they certainly try and they focus on things like Wairarapa and power sites.
Yeah.
Difficult to ask you a question if you haven't read them. So
yeah, I've vaguely read them, but haven't bothered to give you.
David, it would be if I can point out, Jenny, that there are things in there what you can do that aren't going to
Permitted activities.
They're permitted activities, normal day-to-day farming.
There's actually, Jenny, rule 2 is, actually speaks about it's rule 2, 1G, where grazing of livestock is a permitted
Activity, yeah. But if we wanted to put in a dam or.
Yeah, not a dam possibly, but
No.
you, fence.
Fence lines, because originally fence lines weren't permitted.
Yeah, they are permitted.
They are permitted now.
Water lines.
Yeah, permitted.
So installation of fence posts, water troughs, water pipes.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, maintenance and repair of tracks.
Yeah.
But it would.
I'm not sure it's unreasonable though, that if there's a long polygon over it, then sites inside must be identifiable to actually ring the area. So what the point are asking for is actually some more clarity around what's caused that polygon to be.
Yeah.
Well, you got the answer earlier, councillor, the 300 down to 100.
Yeah.
So
Oh, absolutely. But if they know that and they're already identified, the points,
one of the,
as Jenny said, that she's been there, the family's been there since the block was first opened.
Yeah. The difficulty for us, Jenny, is we have to make a decision based on the evidence that's presented to us.
Yeah.
And the absence.
Vague.
And absence saying, look, this just doesn't cut the mustard in terms. It's going to be difficult for us to move away from the polygon approach on that side.
So why did you come up with a polygon approach?
Again, the officers who prepared it on the basis that there were a number of unidentifiable sites or unknown sites. And the idea was that a point source site would exclude those. And the polygon was an idea of trying to get coverage of all of those sites and the areas in between, which may or may not be have some significance to Maori. And so
it just seemed a bit odd when you've already allowed the subdivision with resource consent over the polygon, like there is 15 houses over that polygon area.
Well, we've got Hamid here in the background. Hamid, would you want to attempt to answer that question as to why the polygon was applied on this particular site?
Hello, Hamid, nice to see you.
Thanks.
Do you know, first of all, Hamid, do you know the site?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I can't sort of picture where all the
so
it goes all the way down.
So the book starts just before the Whakamu Stream, right down to Te Roi. No, the other way.
Oh yeah.
You've got no sites going to the Awhia, but you've got them going south.
Okay. So what the question is, what's the purpose behind having a polygon?
Yeah.
As opposed to identifying sites individually
for that particular
area.
For that particular area.
And I do know that you questioned one of the sites in the
solitaire.
When the landowners were notified. And I looked at that site and altered. I do know that. That's capturing sites, being aware that it's not everything is covered within, they're not, that's what we know about mostly on the ground. We don't, there's lots of, and you'll be aware there's things that happen because it's so much been the nature of those sites. We've got cars, kumara pits, gardens, and all that. It spreads across quite an area. But I mean, the thing is that it's not, and you raised the point about other subdivisions have been approved, and this is not about trying to grab what's in the middle. It's an approach that we're not, having to identify site specifically, because when you get right down to a burial, then which there are some, then that's not something that we want to do. So that's part of it. But it's also knowing that those sites that are there, such as the power sites, are actually bigger than what the than what you see. So and then that's we've been involved in all those
Yeah,
subdivisions.
that's right.
And we've let them go ahead. We've had to, juggle things around. I mean, when at Awhia was a club, but that's it's not trying to capture all that land. And say
Well, that one's not on it. The Awhia one's not on it. That's the ironic thing. The South Tour Reserve, well, south of Pukeru is, but
You need a street address.
when you said the Awhia one, you was talking about the north of the
the
river.
north of the river,
I think you'll find that
it's on there.
it's on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're
Thank
just
you.
bringing that, just before we go, we're bringing this up on the screen.
Okay,
There we go.
that's the
That's
Awhia.
along the Awhia, right?
It's along the Awhia.
Yeah, that's.
Am I going north or south from?
South. So south of that other little wriggle. Yep. So it's there, that one.
Further down, yeah.
Too far down there. Can you go north?
Go, you're right.
Long one.
Yeah, it's the,
Along the coast, isn't it?
yeah,
Can I zoom out a little bit?
yeah. So you've got further south, it's that piece down the bottom. You've got
No, that's the white,
it's the rocks.
Got 7.
white rock.
Yeah, it's the orange blobs.
You've got the Tora Farm Settlement Road and you want,
Okay, I'll go into the other Wairarapa internal map. So this has got the aerial and you'll probably better show me where.
yeah.
What was your address up there?
Try 400 Tora Farm Settlement Road. No, 400. Okay. 445. Oh, yeah, somewhere there.
Finding something then.
We're 130, but it's miles away from there. It's on our boundary.
That's sort of subdivision.
Yep. So it goes, no, it's south of, north of that one.
North of that one?
Yeah, north of all that subdivision. Just there, it starts there.
Oh, yep, Taurus.
Our boundary, yeah.
All right, and it's
Starts there and goes all the way south through those houses.
Oh,
okay. Now I'll jump onto.
That long narrow one then.
yeah.
It's this one here because that's boundary.
Yeah.
It crosses both properties.
Yep. Well, it's got about 30 landowners.
What's that? Is that the coastal line, is it?
It's the sort of significance, what area of significance in that case.
Yeah, that area of significance. I was just confused as to how you could do a whole, why you need to have a blanket approach when you've already got houses and already done the bits, so you would have identified those sites.
It was probably establishing a process for the belts and braces type approach. And if you can show that you're not affecting anything, then you're clear.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in, Robin.
Okay.
Should we break or?
Right, Agnes, so we have these guys
You can't turn the sirens on for you when you.
Jeremy Partridge.
online.
Jeremy. Jude coming at 3. Raymond, we can either take a break now and come back at 3:15 and have you present then, or we can make a start now and see how we go and then have a break halfway through. What's your preference?
I'm happy to go ahead if you've got energy to hear more and discuss.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come on up, Amos Cooper.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Dean Raymond tōku ingoa. So, introduce yourself, Eleanor.
Kia ora koutou, ko Eleanor tōku ingoa.
Welcome, both of you.
Thank you very much.
You were here this morning. You've heard the 42A presentation and summary statement?
Yes, for the heritage part, I missed Hamish's start of the day, but I was here for the other part.
Good. Do you want to start with the SASM matter? Is that, or?
The SASM matter, I don't think there's anything in contention in terms of
the general support
to A and my evidence about that. So it's really the things that seem to be in contention in terms of the Heritage New Zealand submission is the curtilage and the contributing places within precincts.
Yes, I agree.
So the other things have been agreed or dropped at some stage.
We've given you a few sort of breadcrumbs along the way to think about.
Yeah. How would you like us to start? We could both speak briefly to our evidence and then follow up with.
I'd prefer to concentrate on the issues if that's
sure.
Easier. That's not to belittle the evidence that you've provided already, but if you're able to talk about the curtilage area issue first.
Sure. So it was interesting to note what I was hearing this morning. You asked questions about what is heritage, and the planner and David Kernan both had quite different approaches. So as you said, it's not really appropriate to have a rule, which is very subjective, and different people are going to have different interpretations of where the boundary is and if you need it. That's really where the submission and my statement's coming from. Yeah, there should be a bit more certainty. So, but I'll just responding to the summary statement. So Becca's paragraph 33 is over 400 listings schedule 1. A very brief look at the schedule, it seems that about 3/4 of them would be urban areas, so commercial or residential. In those cases, the majority of those would be, a curtilage could be defined as site, the property boundary, which means it's not a major ask to define where it is or where it isn't. For the rural ones, or perhaps some non-rural but large sites, the curtilage should be defined so that it's clear where it is or where it isn't. And some of those, a watershed that might be a 20-metre buffer around it, that may be appropriate. Others may be case-by-case basis. A number of those would be listed by Heritage New Zealand, which would have a listing extent already established under that process, so that would help. So I think the scale of work for 400 listings is not as huge as it may appear at first impression. So obviously you did mention, looking my direction this morning, that you might look at changing the definition or look at other options for narrowing it down without necessarily mapping curtilage. Eleanor, would you like to mention something about curtilage? Or highlight anything in particular?
Just that from my experience, it clarifies things from a property owner's perspective, and also from a, from the other end of a resource consent perspective. It can kind of speed things up, make it clear for an owner right at the start of a project they're going to be allowed to do something at the back of their property or not. Removes that ambiguity, which I think can only be a benefit to property owners who are slightly beleaguered by the idea of heritage in the first place.
I take your point on the scale, but putting that to one side, the question is whether there's a fairness issue in starting to map curtilage in the district plan without the opportunity for individual property owners to be involved. Do you have any comment on that?
I think it's not increasing. If you see heritage as a burden on a property in terms of consenting requirements, it's not adding to the burden.
How do we know that? I accept at the moment it's undefined, it's unmapped. and the definition is open to some interpretation, which creates an issue about having certainty when you deal with permitted activity rule, but also certainty in triggering consent requirements also. So the two rules that are affected are largely demolition of buildings and the introduction of buildings onto it. So, and there's two different activity statuses, I think, at the moment, restricted, discretionary and discretionary. But, so, you know, I don't know if the panel can be certain that it won't add any additional requirement. People might, if for those urban sites you referred to, where the curtilage could be the entire site, it may be that individual owners might have been able to advance a case under the current definition that the curtilage was less than the entire site, which would create a fairness issue in my mind.
Yeah, okay, I understand your point.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be difficult. I want a solution
Yes.
to this. But even if the resources were there to do the mapping exercise, I think it might create a procedural issue that the panel might struggle with. So in light of that, the two options seem to be either to come up with to either radically delete the policy and rules that refer to curtilage, and that's something that Ms Adams had identified as an option but didn't support, or to retain the rules and policies and try and be more definitive with the definition. Third option is to do nothing, just rely on what's in the plan at the moment, and the option that involves, as Ms Adams said, pre-application meetings and making decisions on the hoof. Not an ideal situation.
Yes.
So I'm a planner, I certainly don't know the solution. I was hoping that you and Ms Adams might be able to come up with something between you.
We can probably discuss things. It seems tricky to come up with a better definition because it is site specific. Okay. In some cases, it might include the backyard of certain residential properties. Other cases, it might not. And you have a large place that's residentially zoned, like Fareham House.
Yes.
It's the house and surrounds. It might not be a place which is separated from the main Fareham House by a separate property, and it's got its own access that might be outside of curtilage. So it's the place which has the heritage values associated with the building or structure. How do you know that until you do an assessment of where the heritage values lie and how it relates to the building?
So I guess what we need to understand is what's the risks of doing nothing, of going with the notified status quo versus making a change. The other change that Ms Adams identified was the far north proposal, where you identify specific setbacks from the building, I think 20 metres or
20 metres.
Yes. Now that probably was within scope of somewhere between mapping the full extent and identifying a curtilage that's bears some resemblance to the position of the building on the site.
Yeah. Yes, so it's potentially could be looked at and look at a number of different case studies, how it would fit 20 metres perhaps, but excluding property owned by a different person.
Yes.
Well,
in some cases, that 20 metres would extend beyond the property that's listed. Yes. If you look at a typical residential section being 20 metres wide. Yeah. So there's 4 or 5 options that Ms Adams has identified. None of them are ideal, including the status quo, and it's a matter of knowing which one proposes the least risk. There might need to be a fix through a separate Schedule 1 process, and we can recommend that.
Yes.
But in the meantime, we want to make a decision on what's going to come out in our decisions.
Yes.
So can I leave that with you and Ms Adams to try and work through?
Yes, I think we can do that. We can see if we can come up with something that works.
Because I presume you wouldn't support, and neither would Ms Adams, deleting the policy and the rules that refer to curtilage.
No, not unless you have something like the equivalent rule, addition of buildings, for example, on the site containing heritage, but that captures very large properties as
It does.
smaller ones.
Yeah. In hindsight, the council might have approached this differently and talked about setting or something, or if they had the resources, define the curtilage for each property. Mr. Kernan, did you have any views on this? I mean, you must have come across this matter in other jurisdictions.
I think it comes back to whether it's a building, a place, or a site that has been recognised as historic heritage. And if it's a place, one assumes the place is the legal boundary of the place rather than the building itself. So there's a sort of holiness to any definition of, you're so-and-so's listed, but what exactly is their interior, exterior of the garden, or as I said with St. Gerard's, the harbour. It's also, and I apologise to planners, but there's a tendency with a lot of these mappings, include outstanding natural landscapes, to be drawn in 2 dimensions. And they're not 2-dimensional. And curtilage in many ways isn't. We can talk about curtilage as being the ambience of, can we map the ambience of Great Town? It's getting into some very philosophically tricky territory, and in many respects, my recommendation is to leave it as ad hoc, as advisory as one can be, but case by case is much better than prescriptive rules.
I mean, if the panel was to accept that, Mr. Raymond and Ms. Adams, we need to be assured that there were going to be no unintended consequences, or that we don't want to create a situation where there's debate down the road as to whether the rules are triggered or not. Particularly when you're dealing with permitted activities, someone goes ahead and puts in a dwelling or a new building, or takes away a building, and then the council has to undertake enforcement proceedings to say, well, hang on, you triggered rule 2 because that building is in the curtilage. We've had a look at the definition of curtilage and we don't think it is.
Yes.
So
yeah, and I think probably majority of cases it won't be a problem. People can agree and it can be obvious, but there may be cases where the owner says this isn't curtilage, and they get as far as building consent and someone else says there's a different opinion. So that's the concern that it is open to.
I think the benefit here is we've got wide scope. Your submission has asked for the curtilage to be defined or mapped. So, and that involves, presumably that involves the entire site, presumably. Therefore, that's one extreme. The other extreme is not to map it and just leave it descriptive. So it's whatever option, and it may be a sub-optional option, but still the best option of the range that you identify. But I don't think I can add to that panel. Do you? Anything further?
No.
Well, we'll leave that one in your capable hands.
Have you got a time frame of, well, what would you like us to do?
Again, by the 20th would be nice, but again, if there's a lot riding on this, and I'm conscious that the next 2 weeks are going to be very important, so you come back to me if you can't do it in that time frame, and we'll give an extension.
Sure, we can.
Yes.
Before Christmas, it won't be in January.
Oh, well, I understand that, and
Before Christmas.
yeah. there is some benefit in getting it out and be ahead. Now, the second issue was the issue of contributing and non-contributing buildings.
Yes. So just responding to summary statement from paragraph 43. Yes. So I think the description of these precincts will be very helpful, because framework relies on the policies. It's another question whether it could be changed to straight to discretionary, but either way, the policies we looked at, the policies, I think especially the new about the effects on heritage values. And therefore, it's good to have a description of what the values are of that precinct. What are we looking at? What's the streetscape of a residential precinct? What are the values? If you're doing some sort of alteration, new buildings or demolition,
does that leave that in the realm of an information only amendment then? If it's going to play a part in evaluation and assessment, shouldn't that be part of the public process?
So the policy is, what are the effects on heritage values? How do we understand what those values are? So we turn to the description.
Yep.
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Those values haven't been signalled as part of the notification though, have they? And for all of the precincts?
I don't believe they are. There's no design guide, but it is more of a description.
I think Ms. Adams said that some of the Penny's had some descriptions for Master Squares in Victoria and some of the residentials of Greytown Main Street, but those descriptions are absent for the rest of the precincts.
Yes.
So if the resource consent assessing a new building or demolition of an existing building relies on those descriptions, is that creating a fairness issue for people that might have otherwise wanted to be involved in what those descriptions say? Or are we dealing with just undisputed facts about what the precinct's descriptions are? See what I mean?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Not sure. Do you want to add anything about the precincts? And we had a drive around during the lunch break of the 4 Masterton precincts to see beyond what you can see on Street View and walk around some of them. Yes.
What would you like me to comment on, sorry?
What I'd like you to comment on is there's been a suggestion that whilst half of the precincts have some description about what their characteristics are and the values that are present, the other half don't. And there's Miss Adams has said it would be possible to add in descriptions for those that don't contain one already. And I'm wondering what the implications of doing that are, particularly if the assessment of the resource consent is going to be against those values that are up until now are not described, and whether that creates a fairness issue for anyone that might have wanted, who owns a property, might have wanted to dispute those values descriptions and don't have an opportunity as part of this right of reply exercise.
Okay.
How essential is it, given that a consent's going to be required either as an RDA or a DA for any new or removal of buildings? How important it is to have a description? There's already for discretionary activity, everything's in the mix. For discretionary, it's the matters that are listed, and for both of them, there's policy considerations.
Would that be one of the matters, the description, if there was to be one?
Could be.
It could be.
Yeah, but if it was just as an information amendment and didn't have any linkage to a matter of discretion,
then
that might be okay.
I guess for me, if you're going to have rules that say things like avoid adverse effects on heritage values, it's really essential to make those as clear as possible. And that's not to say that when you go through the process of researching and writing a synopsis of what those heritage values are, that you capture everything that ever happened or that could be found out to be significant about that place. Things can unfold over time. So I think it would be good to have it there as a touchstone of here's what is commonly understood to be significant here and worth protecting. if a property owner does some research of their own and finds out something additional, or their building, which looks to be unusual against the rest of the buildings, actually has its own story and can be said to lend something to the overall significance of that place, I think they should still be able to put forward that argument.
During the consent process.
Yeah, perhaps through a heritage assessment or assessment of effects or something like that.
Maybe it's more of an issue if we're dealing with a permitted activity, or a low level consent. I'll leave that for you and Ms Adams to discuss. Might just want to give us some confidence that it's not going to have an unintended consequence by adding in those descriptions for the precincts that don't have one already.
Some of the descriptions, some of the areas, which are on the New Zealand Heritage List,
yes,
have good descriptions already on that system. So Brant's, Peth and Solway, we have available descriptions of those heritage areas on the New Zealand Heritage List, including, specific buildings which are part of those. So that would help in terms of contributing to that description.
Would, in the absence of anything in the district plan on those sites that don't have descriptions, the information you just referred to that's held by Heritage New Zealand not come into play anyway?
Yeah, I expect it could come into play if people access that information. It would be on the public listing to some extent.
But a reporting officer on a resource consent would no doubt look at that in the absence of anything in the district plan to assist them on what the values are.
Yeah, I would expect so.
Okay. Look, I don't want to take that any further. I'll leave that for you. The big issue is whether there should be contributing or non-contributing buildings identified.
Yes.
In these precincts, particularly where there's no scheduled buildings in that particular precinct.
Yes. So I think that seems to be best practice to have that differentiation. But maybe in terms of process, it's a difficult thing to achieve at this stage.
And retrospectively, I think it is. And I just wanted to suggest that and say in an ideal, if the council were doing this again, that might be our expectation to start off with that approach.
Yes.
And then you could have a basis for a differentiation activity status.
Yeah.
Haven't done that. Going to take resources to do that. And again, there's a fairness issue because particularly if there's a difference between contributing and non-contributing. And I was suggesting that maybe the way to deal with that is drop the activity status down for both the additions and the removals, and so that they were both the same activity status. Again, it's not optimal.
It's not optimal, but it restricted discretion. Of course, it narrows that discretion that people know what they're dealing with and what they need to address.
Again, I'm happy for you to have a discussion offline on this and maybe come up with a solution. I don't think there's only so far we can probably take it this afternoon.
Yes.
But I didn't want you to leave thinking the panel had a huge appetite for undertaking that exercise in the same way they didn't have a huge appetite for the mapping of the curtilage.
Yes, understood.
That's just a function of where the council's at in terms of their resources and also the stage of this process, because it's not just a resourcing issue, it's a fairness issue.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so talking again. Yeah, Craig. No.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, Miss Adams, was there anything that struck you that you want some clarification on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Mr. Kernan, you're all good?
Yeah, just a comment that complying and non-complying with what? Because if it's with heritage status, then it's
no non-complying activities triggered by these rules. They're all, worst you can get to is discretionary, but with strong focus on the wording of the policy.
again, scale and bulk of buildings in streetscapes, for instance, can have a positive effect on the heritage values of that street.
Yes.
Or a negative one. And it's really quite difficult to define.
Okay, knowledge. Mr. Wesner, you're the recorder of these issues. Is there anything that you're uncertain about? You'll be.
We'll see at the end of the day.
Okay.
I've got accurately.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Thank you, Mr. Raymond.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are you later in the hearings, Paulie, or?
I don't. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm not sure what's the next.
Next week, we're dealing with the rest of the overlays.
I don't think I'm coming in for that one, but if I need to, I'll be available.
Thanks again, and thanks for making the effort coming over. Appreciate that. Yeah.
3:45.
Yes, we're going to break until 3:45. My deputy chair tells me.
We're running on time, aren't we?
We are.